Welcome to the Brass and Woodwind Shop. This will be a video about repadding a flute. I will not go into detail in this video, but if you do want to go into detail, look in the description below for links to other videos. The first thing that I do is take a quick look at the flute and see what it needs. I take a look at the pads. Several of these pads look like they've been ripped and have holes in them. And once you get about 6 or 7 or 8 pads that are bad, it's probably about time to repad it because the other pads probably will go bad soon after. Another thing that I see is these keys look very loose. Let's check those ones. Yes, those ones are loose too. Probably because these screws are working their way out. So when I repad it, I'm going to have to take care of that. And also there's a little bit of tarnish underneath there. It's not that bad. I do polish every flute that I repad. That's because once it's taken apart, it's a lot easier to polish than when the keys are on. Another thing I notice is that this ring has come loose. Yeah, look at that. I can just pull that right off. So I'm going to have to solder that back on. Also, I can see that the tenon ring is tapered, and probably this would be very loose, so probably wobble around. Yeah, see how wobbly the foot joint is? So I'm going to have to take care of that too. For the head joint, there are some dents in there, and the lip plate has a little dent. I'm going to take care of that. So now I know what I'm working on with this flute. It looks like about a standard repad. Nothing is too damaged, but I do have a few things I need to address. Flutes are very easy to take apart if there are no problems. To get started, I'm going to pull out the foot joint hinge rod, and that is very easy to do. Just one screw here pulls out 3 keys, and then you take off the 3 keys, put those off to the side. The foot joint is apart. For the head joint, all you need to do is take out the head cork assembly. There's that. The body of the flute looks a little complicated because of all the keys, but it's actually very easy to take apart. There are only a few screws on here. You take out this screw, and that takes off the C key and the left-hand keys with one small pivot screw that takes out the right-hand keys. Sometimes you encounter problems with taking apart a flute, but usually it's pretty straightforward and not hard to do. Saxophones are a lot harder to take apart. Flutes are very easy. And that looks a little rusted, so I'm going to have to take care of the rust on that hinge rod when I put that back together. There, the flute is all apart. The keys are all off at least. The third thing to do is remove the old pads and corks. These pads are held on by a plastic grommet, and usually they're held on by a screw and a washer, but these are plastic grommets. So the way to get those off is to carefully pry them up with a screwdriver. They do make a tool to do this, but I do not own that tool. And if you're careful with the screwdriver, you will not do any damage. And you will damage the pads, but the pads are already going to be replaced anyways, so that really does not matter. There are 3 pads that are glued in, so to do that, you take the torch and heat up the pads. So you heat up the pad and pull that out. To get the corks off, you just take the side of a razor and scrape those off, and those usually come off very easily. I have all the corks off the keys. I'm also going to pull the cork off of the head cork assembly, and that one came off easily too. I'm going to replace this at the end of the repad while I'm waiting for the pads to seat. To finish pulling out the corks and the pads, I'm going to remove the pads, and those usually come off very easily. Sometimes they're glued in also, but usually they're just held in by the washers or the grommets. Also usually some shims that come off when you pull off the pads, and I saved those because you can use those later for other projects. The fourth thing that needs to get done is this needs to get cleaned and polished. And this is not really that bad. If you take it apart, you can see that there's a little bit of tarnish, a little bit of dust, but it's not very bad. I'm going to dip the head joint, foot joint, and body in the liquid silver polish, but the keys, I am not going to dip these in the silver polish. If I do dip them in the liquid silver polish, I need to take them apart. I only take these keys apart if they need it, but these ones do not need it, so I'm going to leave them together. I'm just going to put a drop of oil where the keys meet and then work the oil in. And this is easy to do. Here's the tub of chemicals. I just put it in there, move it around a little bit. and let it drip. And that's about it for the silver polish, or at least the liquid silver polish. Then I clean this up with the brushes. To polish this, I'm going to use a strip of cloth that I ripped off of a larger strip of cloth. I'm going to put some silver polish on this. And you don't need much silver polish to do this, just a little bit. I'm going to rub that around onto the cloth. And I'm going to use this to do the polishing. I have this peg that I put in my bench, and then I hold onto the flute with my belt, and then I take the cloth, and then I just rub it around real quick on the flute. If this were dirtier than it was, I would have wiped it off with a cloth before I put it in the chemicals, because I do not want to clog my chemicals with all kinds of dirt and dust and everything. But this was not bad at all, so I just dipped it without doing that. I did a video on polishing a flute, so I'm going to leave the link in the description below to that video if you want to learn more about polishing. For the keys, I take the cloth and put the cloth in the vise, and then I just rub the keys back and forth over the cloth, and then I do that over the whole key. Then for the touch pieces, I just put that like that and turn that around like that, and that cleans those up. The fifth thing to do is remove the dents. There are not that many dents on here, but there are a few small ones there, and a few also on the body. That is done mostly with this tool. This is a Flute head joint mandrel, but it also works on the body quite well. And sometimes you need other mandrels than this to get dents out, but usually this does, I'd say 90% of the dent work on flutes. This tool can do it. Also, I'm going to solder the ring on. This is called a 1/3 ring, and it goes right here. It was loose when it came in here, and I took that off, so I'm going to solder that on now too. Also, while I'm working on the dents and the soldering, you may remember that I said that this is loose and that is bent, so I'm going to work on that at the same time. I got all the body work done on the flute, and I got the 1/3 ring soldered on. So the next thing to do is cork the keys. This is my cork cutting board that I used to cut cork on. And I keep my cork on this board too. And whenever I have scraps of cork, I do not throw it away. I put it on this board, and then I use it later for keys and whatever else I need to use it for. I have several different thicknesses of cork on this board, so I get the size that I need, or the thickness that I need. Then I take my torch, heat up the key, and stick the cork on there. And the reason that this sticks is I have some contact cement on it, and it's already dried, but once you heat it up, then it activates it again and it sticks. So I put the cork on there, and then I cut the cork. There is the cork. I'm done putting the corks on a key, and there also is one felt that goes on one of the keys. Now it's time for the seventh thing, which is put the pads onto the keys. First of all, I'm going to figure out what size I need. And these are usually 11.5 millimeters for the small ones. The other pads vary in size from around 17 millimeters up to around 20 millimeters. I also have the Flute pad shims, and those are to make sure that the pads come out of the pad cup the right amount. Then I put the plastic grommets back on to hold the pads in, and sometimes these get worn out with use, so if it comes loose then I will just replace it, but I think these ones are going to be okay. And I just pull on it a little with my fingernail, and if it comes loose then it needs to be replaced. But that held, so it should be okay. And this tool is made for this purpose of installing these plastic grommets. However, if you do not have that tool, you can just take a dowel and tap it in with a mallet. And that works fine too. When you install pads, they get wrinkles in them. So to get the wrinkles out, you put a little bit of water on the pads, and then you take a pad iron with a hole cut in it, and you heat it up, and then you put it on the pad, and that irons it out and it smooths out the wrinkles in it. After you're done with that, there are still 3 more pads to put in, and these need to be glued in. So you put a little bit of glue on the pad, and then you put the pad in the pad cup and level it with the pad leveler. And then you do that with all 3 of those. The next step is to put the flute back together. So I'm going to clean off the hinge rod and put some oil on there. And as I put it together, I'm also going to level the pads. So I guess this step would be putting it back together and leveling the pads, and also cleaning out the hinge rods and the inside of the keys. So you do that by working those around. If the inside of the key is really dirty, you can wipe off the hinge rod and also take a pipe cleaner and clean that out. This one is not that bad, but I'm just showing you what you can do if it is very dirty. And then put some more oil on there and put it together. And then I screw in the hinge rod and hook up the springs, and I use the spring hook for that. You push the spring back behind the spring cradle, and then that is done. As I put the flute together, I'm going to check these pads to see if they're level. And I do one hinge rod at a time. I put on the keys for one hinge rod, which in this case is going to be 3 keys. The feeler gauge is a wood dowel with a part of a cassette tape on it. I did a video a while back on how to make one of these, so if you want to watch that video, look in the description below for a link to that video. Now what I'm doing is I'm feeling around the pad to see where the pad is touching the tone hole. And in this case, it is not touching here at all, but around the back it's touching there. See how it pulls on the feeler gauge? It is seating right here in the back off to this side, but it is not seating here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of cardboard, and the way you can make one of these is take a box of reeds and then fold it like that so that it is 3 thicknesses thick. Then you put that underneath where it does seat and level the pad to where it does not seat. And then take that out and test it again. Okay, I went a little too far because now it seats over here. So I'm going to put that right there and then push back. Not quite as hard this time. There are other ways to level flute pads. I do it this way on student model instruments. If I were working on a professional model instrument, I would use the partial shimming, but on student models I do this way. Some people do not like doing it this way, but on student models, if you went to the factory, you would see them leveling pads the same way. So the pads have already been leveled this way, so doing it this way will not hurt it at all. But if you want to use the partial shimming method, that is fine too. They both work well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to level this pad until it seats evenly all the way around. Okay, that is good. It pulls on the feeler gauge evenly all the way around. When I'm done with the foot joint, I'm going to move to the body of the flute and again put one of the hinge rods on at a time and then level the pads as I am putting the keys on the flute. I'm almost done putting the flute together, but there's one more thing I wanted to show you. These small pads here, there are 3 of them. They are glued in. Find out where the high spots and low spots are. Okay, the pad seats in the front but not in the back. So what I'm going to do is heat this up to melt the glue and then push the pad back a little bit. And then I will check it to see if it's good. It needs to come forward a little bit now, so I'm going to move it a little bit forward. And I'm just going to do that until it is level. All of the pads have been leveled, so they sit like they're supposed to on top of the tone hole. Now I'm ready to seat the pads. And what seating does is it takes the pad and makes a little crease in the pad so that it sits on the tone hole the way it's supposed to. The way I do that is I take a cotton swab and I squish it in the vise, and that's to make it a little thinner so that it can fit between the pads and the tone holes. And then I take some water and dip it in the water, and then I put the water on all of the pads. And once the water is on all of the pads, I take these clamps here and put those on each of the keys to hold them down. And another thing you need to look out for is sometimes an adjustment can cause a pad not to close all the way. So what you'd do then is you would take the screw for the adjustment and back the screw off. You'd turn the screw to come out so that it would open that key up. So for example, if the F-sharp key keeps the E key from closing, then you would back the screw off and then that one would close. Because when you're seating them, you want them all to close. I'm going to put one clamp on each of these keys. I have the clamps on all the keys, so now what I'm going to do is heat up the pads. And the way I'm going to do that is with a hair dryer. I do have a heat gun, but mine broke, so I do need to order another one. So I'm using a hair dryer until I can get a new heat gun. Blow the heat through the flute until it gets warm. You do not want it so hot that it melts the glue or that the corks come loose on this, but you do want it warm to the touch. Okay, it's starting to get warm. Okay, now what I'm going to do is put this off to the side and wait, maybe a half hour or so for that to finish seating. While I'm waiting, I'm going to install the head cork. I'm putting some cork cement on one end of the head cork, and then I'm putting some glue on this part of the stopper assembly, and I'm going to wait for that to dry for a few minutes. The cork cement has dried, so now I can put this together and push that together like that. Now I'm going to put some liquid shellac on the other end of the cork, like that, and put this on there. Now I'm going to fit the head cork assembly into here. And I did a video on this, and I'm going to leave a link in the description below for that video. The head cork assembly is done. Now I need to wait for the pads to finish seating, and there's always plenty of stuff in the shop to do. So I'm going to do a little bit of work on some other instruments and then get back to you when these pads are done seating. It's been about a half an hour and I'm taking off all the clips. Now what I'm going to do is adjust the pads, and adjusting them is making sure that they close at the same time, and that's different than regulating. Regulating is making sure that they start to close at the same time. There's the F to F sharp to B flat adjustment, the A to B flat, and a few others. So I need to make sure that they all close at the same time like they're supposed to. The way I do that is I use the feeler gauge again. I see which one is closing. This one closes, but these do not close all the way. So I need to adjust those so that they do close. I use the screwdriver to turn the adjustment screws, and that opens and closes the pads as they need to so that they all close together. I finished adjusting the keys, so all of the keys close at the same time now. Now what I need to do is make sure that they start to close at the same time. And along with that, the pad height is not correct on a lot of these, but once I take care of the regulation, the pad heights should open up to the correct height. Those two things go together. Adjusting is making sure that the pads close at the same time, and if it is adjusted, it will play. So the flute will work because the pads all close at the right time, but if the pads do not start to close at the same time, it is not going to feel right. The player will not like the feel of it, and it may be out of tune. The next thing to do is regulate the flute. You start with the F key, and the foot for the F key is right here. And if that is opened the right amount, then all of the keys that are in adjustment with each other, which would be the right hand keys and the left hand keys, those are going to be okay. You'll still need to check the independent keys, and also on the foot joint you'll need to check these keys, but the keys that are in adjustment with each other, these ones will all be the right height if you regulate it to the F key. You need to check the pad height for the F key, and that needs to be opened up a little bit farther. So I'm going to take the sandpaper and sand down the cork underneath the F key, and it does not need to be very much on this one. Okay, that looks about right, so I'm going to regulate the other keys to the F key. What I need to do is make sure that these keys start to close at the same time, and they do. The D key starts to close a little bit before it starts to close the F sharp key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to bend the foot of the key down a little bit. I do that with a pad slick. I push my thumb down on the pad slick over the foot of the D key, Now let's see, that still closes a little bit before the other one, so I need to close it a little bit more. And I hold down the key with my thumb, and then with the other thumb I push down on the foot of the same key. Let's see how that is now. Okay, that feels good. Okay, the F key, the F to F sharp is still in regulation. The E to F sharp is good. The D to F sharp is good. So these are all in regulation. Now I need to regulate the F to B flat. Okay, you can see that these start closing well before the B flat key. So I'm going to go through all these keys, make sure that they open the right height to be in tune, and also that they are in regulation with each other. I playtest every instrument when I'm done with it to make sure that it works like it's supposed to and that I did not miss anything. If I do miss anything, then I need to fix it. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more band instrument repair videos and look in the description below for links to related videos.